softness. Oh well. running about 12 or so online.
As I ring the Tibetan bowl, I invite you to breathe deeply. Release the tension from your body and simply be present in this moment.
It's not going to work.
And now relax and enjoy the music once again. Good morning and welcome, members, friends, and visitors to the Unitarian Universalists of the Chester River. Can you hear me? Where our mission is to inspire, inform, and support all who seek spiritual and personal growth and a more equal and just community. We are glad to have you here with us this morning, whether it's in person or on our Zoom live feed. My name is Lynn Olinger, and I am your service leader for today. I'd like to offer a special welcome to our guest speaker this morning, Karen Bergman Marsh, who will be addressing us on the creation story of Unitarian Universalism. Ms. Marsh holds a Master of Divinity and serves as a chaplain resident at the Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore. She is a member of Towson Unitarian Universalist Church, where she was an active lay leader prior to answering the call to ministry. Before accepting her residency, Ms. Marsh served as a ministerial intern at All Souls Unitarian Church of Tulsa. She graduated from Starr King School for the Ministry in May 2020 and was granted preliminary fellowship by the Unitarian Universalist Association in April 2021. We are also fortunate to have a good friend of our church back to provide his inspiring musical contributions. Please welcome Dick Durham at the piano. I didn't find any announcements in the basket, but I'd like to invite anybody who's on Zoom, if you have an announcement, to make it at this time. Atypical of Unitarians, there's nobody speaking right now, so I will go ahead and move on to the rest of the brief announcements. The offering basket is not passed during COVID, so we ask if you have any contributions to put them in the basket in the lobby on the table that is marked offering. If you are attending via Zoom, please access the donate button on our website. We've gotten so techie. And if you are visiting for the first time, please sign our guest book in the lobby. At this time, we'll have the chalice lighting led by Chaplain Marsh.
Thank you very much, Lynn. Looks like technology has decided to push all of the words that I was going to say at the very bottom, so now I have to find them again. So the following chalice lighting words are from Reverend Andrew Prakula, who is the minister of the Islington and the Newington Green Unitarians in London, England. We light this chalice now, distinctive symbol of our Unitarian faith. Ours is a faith that treasures the past, but that abides fully in the present and looks with hope to the future's promise. Let this flame help us bring to mind those who came before us, holy heretics who gave their lives to create a path free of the encumbrances of narrow thought and lifeless creed. We do not call our heroes saint, but human, flawed and holy, limited and blessed. May this flame remind us that a divine spark resides within each one of us and that we too are imperfect. May its light guide us as we take each faltering step towards a brighter tomorrow. Now we'll have some music.
Thank you once again, Dick. This reading is called Unto the Church Universal. Unto the Church Universal, which is the depository of all ancient wisdom and the school of all modern thought, which recognizes in all prophets a harmony, in all scriptures a unity, and through all dispensations a continuity, which abjures all that separates and divides, and always magnifies all that unifies and brings peace, which seeks truth in freedom, justice in love, and individual discipline in social duty, and which shall make of all sects, classes, nations, and races one global community. Unto this church and unto all its members, known and unknown throughout the world, we pledge the allegiance of our hearts and hands. I read this and I thought, that's got to be a Unitarian. Not at all. That was written by Keshab Chandra Sen, who's a Hindu philosopher and social reformer. Making a not so smooth transition. We're going to have Chaplain Marsh come up now.
Thank you for that. That's really interesting. And that's right in our wonderful Singing the Living Tradition hymnal, which has so many wonderful readings in the back. So as Lynn mentioned, I am a chaplain at Johns Hopkins Hospital. I started this residency back in August. And because it's a residency, it includes an educational component. So I'm actually in classes twice a week in the morning. Now, one of the first things that we had to do in our classes was to explore using story as a tool for providing pastoral care to patients and their families and even staff. And one of the first things we did was to look at our own stories. Now, the use of narrative or stories in occupations is nothing new to me. In my previous career, I used narrative and stories as a matter of course. And perhaps you've done the same in your line of work using stories. And the reason why that is because stories are powerful. We respond to stories. As my husband, Barry, over here was driving me out here to your wonderful church, he was telling me stories because he used to live in this area. It's just natural for us to tell stories. And in fact, if we weren't so into stories, we wouldn't have a publishing industry or a movie industry or a music industry. Now, psychologist and professor at Fielding Graduate University, Pamela Rutledge, has this to say about why stories are so compelling. Stories have always been a primal form of communication. They are timeless links to ancient traditions, legends, archetypes, myths, and symbols. They connect us to a larger self and universal truths. Stories are about collaboration and connection. They transcend generations. They engage us through emotions, and they connect us to others. Through stories, we share passions, sadness, hardships, joys. We share meaning and purpose. Stories are the common ground that allows people to communicate, overcoming our defenses and our differences. Stories allow us to understand ourselves better and to find commonality with others. Stories are how we think. They are how we make meaning of life. Stories are how we explain how things work, how we make decisions, how we justify our decisions, how we persuade others, how we understand our place in the world, create our identities, and define and teach social values. Stories are how we're wired. To the human brain, imagined experiences are processed the same way as real experiences. Dr. Pamela Rutledge on the power of stories. As we share our joys and concerns in a moment, I invite you to think about stories in your life, past and present. What stories are beginning for you right now? What stories are ongoing? And what stories are ending?
Each week, as most of you know, we take time to share what is in our hearts. As we experiment with hybrid services, we have asked folks to submit joys and concerns by email prior to the service, on a note card as they enter the sanctuary, or in the chat if you are on Zoom. And if anybody sees something come up on the chat, please let me know. For now, that is the safe way to do our sharing. I do understand that there may be some changes coming in the near future to our COVID protocols. So keep open to that possibility. Check your newsletter, the reflections coming out this week, but become prepared next week to do the same things we've done this week until you're told different. Okay, now that we got through that technicality stuff, I do have one joy that came in through email from Bob Coleman, who has been one of our recent visitors. He has a joy to express in the support of friends and family as he recovered from sepsis at Easton Memorial Hospital last week. So keep him in your thoughts and prayers. And I'll light that candle and then have two additional ones.
There was one joy on the chat.
Oh, thank you. Can somebody, I suppose I better read that. You don't want to get you guys talking when you're not supposed to be talking. Yeah, I think, okay. If we can find the chat. Where's Nancy Holland? How do I get them? All right, while we're waiting to see how we can figure that out, one of our candles. Oh, thank you. From Nancy Holland to everyone, a joy that my granddaughter Isabella turned 21 on Thursday. Oh, those days. Oh, wow, okay. Bless her. I like one of these candles for Bob, who sent in his joy, like one of these for Nancy and her granddaughter. And the two remaining ones are for us to remember COVID victims, families, and frontline workers who have protected us so much through all this pestilence. And the second one I like for those in the congregation who are facing illness or recovery from either surgeries or illness. For those joys and concerns shared and those remaining in our hearts, please take a moment of silence.
Testing. System ready. Blessed
be. This morning, on behalf of the Social Concern Social Justice Committee, I am pleased to announce that once again, we will be participating in the Kent County Department of Social Services Adopt a Family program for the holidays. This year, unlike last year, we do have the opportunity to provide gifts as well as collect funds to provide gift cards. And last year, we added families in Queen Anne's County, and we will continue to do that as well this year. But the gifts we are collecting this year are just for Kent County. We'll be giving gift cards through our collection to Queen Anne's County. The Kent County CARES Advisory Board Chair, William Washington, was not able to come this morning, but sent this message. On behalf of the Kent County CARES Foundation and our DSS Advisory Board, we thank you for sponsoring the Adopt a Family Holiday Program again this year. Your contribution will help the most vulnerable families, children, and adults in Kent County receive gifts for the holiday season. Individuals and families who are at or below the poverty level are eligible for this program. Referrals are made by case managers who directly serve these families, children, and adults. Sponsors that participate are matched with individuals to make sure they have a brighter holiday. Now more than ever, we need your help. And I asked if the DSS staff could provide us with some stories of people who have benefited from this program in the past. We've been doing this for 7 or 8 years. These are not necessarily families that we helped, but they are families that have benefited from the program. And I'm quoting from these testimonials. I would like to thank the Adopt a Family for giving my family the best Christmas ever. I have a very large family and I was very ill for most of the year. This program made Christmas for my family something that I was not able to do. I am a single mother with 8 children. All 8 of my children received bicycles, toys, gift cards, and clothing for Christmas. I know they will never forget the year Santa brought them everything they wanted and more. This program gave me hope that life does get better, and we were blessed. The second one comes from a single dad with 2 boys and a girl. Trying to make ends meet is very difficult. I didn't know what I was going to do for my children for Christmas. I received a call that I was put on the Adopt a Family program. I didn't even know what that was. Well, that Christmas is one I will never forget. Shopping for a man is not easy. I didn't know what some of the toys were that my children were asking for. Well, Santa came and gave them the toys they asked for. The excitement that morning was one I will never forget. Thank you for giving me the strength to love my children and know there are people that really care. So while we are collecting gifts for this one family that we've been assigned, we will also be collecting funds. Last year, this congregation was incredibly generous, and as they have been in past years. So you have options on how you want to support this program. We have been matched with a family of 6, a mother with 2 boys and 3 girls, ranging in age from 2 to 17. I've posted a list on the bulletin board if you want to provide a gift. Monetary gifts are also welcomed and can be sent through check or cash, but must be marked for holiday sharing. I'm also going to look into whether we can use the donate button, and I will put that information in the newsletter. The deadline for giving is December 19th. So gifts will need to be back here by the 19th, or your funds will need to be in by the 19th. Details will be provided in the reflections starting this week, but don't hesitate to call me or contact me if you have questions. And also, if you want to sign up for a gift and can't get to church, particularly, noting people we have on Zoom, don't hesitate to call me and we'll make sure you get assigned a gift. And if you need gifts picked up for the same reason, let me know. Thank you very much. Now we're going to have Dick. help us with music again.
Thank you so much, Dick. Your music is wonderful. Wonderful. So in our reading today, Dr. Rutledge pointed out that our stories help create our identities. And as I mentioned in my clinical pastoral education classes, we've been examining our family of origin stories and asking the question of how our origins affect our identities as chaplains. It's a really helpful, I've been finding it to be very helpful way to understand how we might show up in our patient encounters. By knowing our own stories, we're better prepared to listen to other people's stories. And by knowing our own stories, it helps us to empathize with patients and thus to better serve them. Well, it seems natural to examine our origins. As finite creatures, we humans seem to need to frame everything with a beginning and an end. I mean, have you ever asked your parents how they met, perhaps? Did you ever do that? Or maybe you're married or partnered. Did people ask you how you met your life partner? Or did you ever ask your parents about your birth story? Or maybe someone's asked you how you came to work in the job that you worked in, or how you came to live here. It's a way to get to know each other. It's a way to get a sense of other people's identities and our commonalities. One question I've heard a lot at the hospital is how I became a Unitarian Universalist. Now, the majority of UUs actually come in from another faith tradition, if they were raised with a faith tradition at all. Well, I'm one of those come-inners, as they were called. I started off as a Roman Catholic, but effectively left the faith by age 19. You see, I found Catholicism, indeed Christianity in general, to be limiting. That is perhaps what I find the most appealing about my chosen faith, Unitarian Universalism, because it makes space for a much more expansive and inclusive theology or philosophy of life. Yet even Unitarian Universalism has limitations. The other day, I was talking with members of my home congregation, Towson Unitarian, about my work in a multi-religious hospital setting. And they bemoaned the lack of a UU creation story. And of course, being a preacher, I said, aha, I have another topic for a sermon. They were bemoaning basically how we didn't have a singular story like the Christians of all stripes. I mean, they have Jesus's birth, the death, the resurrection as a starting point for their faith. And they mentioned too how Joseph Smith encountered the angel Moroni and received the Book of Mormon, the reputed lost testament of Jesus Christ. Come to think of it, Islam began with the Prophet Muhammad, salam alaikum, and Judaism had Abraham. And Siddhartha Gautama, also known as the Buddha, achieved enlightenment as he sat under a Bodhi tree, and thus began Buddhism. In contrast, Unitarian Universalism doesn't seem to have a cohesive creation story. Now, while Unitarian Universalism doesn't have a founder like Christianity or Islam or Buddhism, we still have an origin story, a creation story. In fact, these two denominations, which joined together in the United States in 1961, so I guess we're on a 60th anniversary, if my math is correct. We have many origin stories, not just one. And some of those stories go back as far as the Council of Nicaea in 325 CE, which marks the establishment of Christianity as we know it today. So I really can't start with the marriage of Unitarian Universalism in 1961 to form the Unitarian Universalist Association, any more than I can point to William Ellery Channing's famed Baltimore sermon framing Unitarian Christianity and claiming the name Unitarian for our own, or Universalist minister John Murray's landing in New Jersey in 1770. Now, I could point to the Reformation of the 1500s when Michael Servetus wrote his seminal treatise entitled On the Errors of the Trinity. Certainly, that work was one of the first publications to challenge the Christian doctrine of three persons in one God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. But Servetus was not the first person to challenge the divinity of Jesus and thus the whole Christian paradigm. There were other people like Francis David and Giovanni Giorgio Biandrata, both advisors to King John Sigismund of Transylvania That's our connection with Dracula, by the way. Who was the first and only Unitarian king in history. King John Sigismund issued the first act of religious tolerance in Europe, known as the Edict of Torda in 1568. These are all origin stories, but they mainly relate to Unitarianism. What about universalism, you might ask? Well, universalism began to emerge as a reaction to the doctrines promoted by Protestant reformer John Calvin. Calvin taught that humans are essentially depraved and that before creation, before all time, God designated an elect few to be saved. So really, there was nothing we could do. Now, to our 21st century senses as Unitarian Universalists, Calvin's ideas may seem absurd, but they were powerful in the 16th and subsequent centuries. In fact, Calvin's ideas around good and evil strongly influenced and still influence US culture today. Like Unitarians, Universalists challenged Calvinist doctrines and dogmas, which upheld really centralized power, political power in Europe and the colonies, and even in the United States. Universalists believed that God was too good to damn us, in the words of Thomas Starr King, a Unitarian minister and namesake of my seminary, and that all humans would eventually be saved. That's where this idea of universal salvation comes from. But these universalist ideas didn't sit well with Protestant and Catholic Christians alike, any more than the idea that Jesus wasn't God. It was heresy. Indeed, heresy is the very thing that Unitarians and Universalists have in common. It was heresy that joined these two denominations together, not only in 1961, but in the centuries before, in the struggle for freedom of conscience. Whether Bishop Arius, who was questioned about the divinity or questioned the divinity of Jesus at the Council of Nicaea in 325 CE, or Origen of Alexandria, who wrote of universal salvation in the 3rd century, there have always been people who questioned the dominant Christian dogma, always. And these people, whom we Unitarians and Universalists alike view as our spiritual ancestors, were all branded heretics, every single one. But heretic isn't such a bad thing, because diversity of thought is what brings us closer to the truth. For example, in the 19th century United States, Universalism was the 6th largest denomination, 6th largest. It was huge, mainly in the countryside, places like rural Maryland. See, battered by Calvinist orthodoxy about being depraved, all that hellfire and brimstone stuff, many Americans found solace and hope in the Universalist theology. But Universalism was a victim of its own success, withered by the contradiction of a supposed merciful God damning humans. Many other Christians denominations began to adopt a more universalist stance. So Universalist Christians actually led the majority of Protestant Christians. Even Catholics today talk about universal salvation. Why was that a problem for Universalism? Well, it began to lose its draw, its main selling point, because it was no longer differentiated. In my conversations with fellow chaplains and even patients, when we are exploring their own spiritual beliefs, I've heard many Lutherans, Baptists, all kinds speak of universal salvation and how they believe in universal salvation. I like to switch a little and talk about the word heretic. Heretic comes from the Greek word meaning to choose. And I can't think of a more apt name for Unitarians and Universalists, especially when so many members of our congregations, well, like me, for example, came out of another faith tradition. I chose to be a Unitarian Universalist. And I'm sure many of our members choose to be members of our congregations, because there's no need to believe in a deity necessarily or have a creed about the afterlife. Nothing like that is forced upon us. We're able to choose. Our theology, or theology, as I've heard it said, is based upon covenant, those 7 principles. It's an agreement on how we will live together in community. And so you may be asking, what is the origin story of Unitarian Universalism? Well, I would say we share the same creation story as Christianity in the life of Jesus. Now, I understand that that name may cause some of you heartache. Many people, like myself, came to Unitarian Universalism because they felt harmed by Christianity, but still wanted a religious community. But I invite you to try to separate out the man, Jesus, from the religions that grew up all around him. Neither Unitarianism nor Universalism would exist without Christianity. Unitarians and Universalists are the Protestants of the Protestants, as Unitarian minister Henry Whitney Bellows said in the 19th century. The Christianity that we know today presents only one interpretation of the identity and mission of this man named Jesus. And historically speaking, both Unitarians and Universalists before they joined and even after they joined have been offering different perspectives on that man. Both Unitarians and Universalists have focused on Jesus' life rather than his death. Both Unitarians and Universalists have viewed Jesus as an exemplar of living in right relationship with God and with humanity and all of creation. The historical Jesus remained an important figure in both American Unitarianism and Universalism up until 1961, when the two denominations came together here. Now, in a bid to be more inclusive, American UUs left the table of Christology, which is the study of Jesus. But in so doing, American UUs may have not only conceded the debate over who Jesus was, his identity, but also forgot our own creation story. And we lost our identity as heretics. I hate to say it, but I think we're really good at saying who we're not, but we're not really good at saying who we are and what we, pardon the ableist language, stand for, and what makes us different from other religious communities. And I don't know about you, but I've experienced a hesitancy to discuss theology and even spirituality in some UU contexts. Now, I'm not suggesting that we go and call ourselves Christians, unless, of course, you identify as a Christian personally. But I am suggesting that we reclaim our place as a religion and our identities as heretics. Well, how do we do that? Well, I think by reconnecting with the UU creation story in the life of an extraordinarily courageous Jewish teacher, Jesus was a Jew, named Jesus. And I'm suggesting that UUs welcome Jesus back into our congregations as much as we welcome the Buddha or the Prophet Muhammad or Mahatma Gandhi. And that's not being exclusionary. That's being true to our heritage In fact, when we're open to talking about Jesus, we're open to talking with the people who follow Jesus, many of whom I note are people of color. A refusal to discuss the life and mission of Jesus in our congregations and the dismissal of any God talk as being exclusionary, it's like slamming the door in the face of a lot of spiritual seekers who might walk through our doors and might be Christians or have some Christian theology. And there are still a lot of Christians in the United States. Christianity is still the dominant religion here. But I sense that a lot of people, and this is in my chaplaincy work, would appreciate hearing a UU perspective on Jesus that focused more upon his message of social justice. I mean, consider just how Jesus disparaged materialism, how he healed both Jew and Gentile alike. He didn't distinguish between anyone. If they sought out healing, he helped them. And how he encouraged everyone to feed the hungry, give water to the thirsty, clothe the naked, welcome the stranger, that's a big one, comfort the sick, and visit those in prison. What is it about this message that is not appropriate for a UU congregation, I ask you? Jesus sure sounds like a humanist, if not a Unitarian to me. After all, he believed in one God. And he stood up to the oppression of the Roman Empire. He was killed for it. Surely his life has some relevance in today's context. Are we not facing empire today? UUs only stand to gain in re-examining Jesus's life and mission and using it as a source for our justice work. We are a small denomination, maybe 100,000 in this country. We can't dismantle oppression without partnering with others, many of whom identify as Christians. I note I have witnessed and worked with many progressive Christians who are doing a great deal of work in dismantling oppression, because Christianity is not a monolith. One Christian is not the same as the next Christian. We need to understand the diversity that's there. And like our Universalist forebears, UUs today have an opportunity to bridge the divisions in our society by working that third principle. You know it, acceptance of one another and encouragement towards spiritual growth. Just as I agree with that. Just as my clinical pastoral education is teaching me, if we know our own stories, we can better hear others' stories. And when we hear others' stories, we can better serve others and the greater good. If we UUs educate ourselves on our heritage in Christianity, we will be better equipped to have conversations with all Christians and all other people who don't follow Christianity, maybe no religion at all. And conversations are the key to building trust and creating community. But we can't have those deep conversations if we don't have some basic biblical literacy and knowledge of our collective creation story as heretics. Imagine what our society might look like if we could have those deep conversations with our Christian and other religious traditions, neighbors, coworkers, peers, anyone that we meet. We might just discover that we have a lot of common values. So I encourage you to explore those stories, which include the life of Jesus, not just for yourselves, but for the good of the whole, for a more peaceful, just, and equitable society. Our closing words come from UU Minister Reverend Maureen Kaloran. No matter how weak or how frightened you may feel, we each have gifts that can make a difference in the world. In this coming week, may you do at least one thing to support the broken, to welcome the stranger, to celebrate what is worthy, to do the work of justice and love. Be strong, be connected. Each day, act so that you may be a little more whole. Amen, Ashe, and blessed be. Let us now join in extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we meet again. I'd like to invite you to remain seated to enjoy the postlude, and then to gather outside or massed inside to greet the others that are here today. Thank you very much.